Rav Yehuda, Rav Gamliel, the son of Rav Yehuda, says that Yofet Talmud Torah derech eretz, that the combination of the study of Torah together with derech eretz, the word derech eretz can mean one of two things: either deportment, one who has appropriate, refined character, or derech eretz means the way of the land, meaning earning a living. You assume your responsibility, your financial responsibility for yourself, for your community. And so the combination of study of Torah and participating in one's own livelihood, the combination is an appropriate and special combination. Why? Because toiling in these two areas causes sin to be forgotten, meaning it removes one from sin. Mashkachas, it becomes something which one doesn't even come to one's purview. It's forgotten. As human beings, we have amenities, we have needs, which are directly connected to us, to our physical makeup. We must eat, we must sleep, we must do many things. For instance, the Talmud tells us that one takes an oath that he's not going to sleep for 3 days. You give him lashes, it's an oath in vain, because a human being cannot stay awake for more than 3 days. So if you make, just humanly, you have to sleep. Humanly, we must eat. There are many things we must do. A person must do his bodily functions. If one withholds his bodily functions, it's a Torah violation, because it's considered you're abominating yourself, withholding yourself. But while we do all these things, one is not able to study Torah. When you sleep, you're not able to study Torah. When we engage in livelihood, we're not able to study in Torah, but it's okay. These are necessities of life. Anything which is a necessity of life is not considered that it's an infringement on your Torah study. But when you have time which is available to you, then one should study Torah. One is obligated to study Torah. Now, what about if a person says that since he's a certain type of personality, he feels he'll ingratiate himself to people, and therefore, by finding favor, people will gift him his needs. They'll underwrite his existence. What is the problem with that? If a person's existence is dependent on others, and it's based on your ingratiating yourself with others, endearing yourself to others, which has to do with flattery, usually, if a person is in need, we don't discern who you flatter, who you ingratiate yourself with. But what about if the people are not upright human beings? And what happens with all the endearment? It doesn't cover your needs. Since the person is not accustomed to assuming responsibility for his own financial need, he resorts to other methods, whether it's lying, whether it's doing things dishonestly. Because the person is never understood or appreciated that he has a responsibility to do things ethically and morally. He was always on on the toll. He was always on the take, always on somebody else's tab, always. So what happens if that doesn't work? He resorts to other methods. And very often those methods are illegal methods. Therefore, the appropriate thing is, the Gemara tells one location, I'll take tzaddik harbe. Don't be too much of a tzaddik. I can't work because. What do you mean can't work because? The Gemara says that one of the great rabbis of the Talmud said, and these were his words, put your carcass in the market and earn a living. There's no such thing. Anybody's above earning a living. It's not a disgrace. If you have to earn a living, you earn a living. That's it. So therefore, a person feels that he should be supported by others. It's not reality. Ultimately, it leads to not good things. So what causes sin to be forgotten? The study of Torah together with, but it says, Yigias, Shneim, Mishkachosov, toiling in both, being fully occupied in the study of Torah and earning a living that causes sin should be not part of your purview, not even consideration, because you're an upright person. But he uses the term yigias, the toil of both of these. Now, we find that at the time after the great flood, when God made a covenant with existence that he's not going to curse the world any longer and bring destruction upon the world. So there God says, why? Because the inclination of man is evil from the moment he's cast from his mother's womb. The moment he's cast from his mother's womb, he's already subject to the negative inclination. So because he has this propensity for evil, therefore it's an Achilles heel of every human being. Therefore, God made a covenant with existence that he will not destroy the world again due to man's misbehavior. Will not, because man is inclined to that. But the term is, when does the evil inclination come upon the person? When he's cast from his mother's womb. So Rabbi Yochanan says in Sanhedrin, but the inference is, but when he's in utero, the evil inclination has no influence on the unborn child. The evil inclination only has an influence on the child once he's born. Pre-birth, not. So the Maral of Prague asks, why? Why is this? It's only Mishnah when it's cast from his mother's womb, only then is the child subject already to the inclination, the negative inclination, the evil inclination. Why? Even though there's no accountability for the child until he becomes an adult, but in terms of inclination-wise, the child already is inclined only to things which ultimately will make him vulnerable to sin. Because the evil inclination is already influencing that child from the time he's cast from his mother's womb. So he says something interesting, the Maral of Prague. God, the way he created the human being or the world, until something is in a complete state, the evil inclination is not permitted to affect that person. In utero, the child is still in development. When is the child complete? When the mother gives birth. Therefore, as a result of this is the extrapolation. When does the inclination come upon man of the child? When he's cast from his mother's womb. Since the child is in a complete state, as a result of that, therefore the child is subject to the evil inclination. So Maral of Prague says something very interesting. What about a person lives his life that in a context he's never complete? For instance, the Torah tells us, based on a verse in Joshua, in prophets, a Jew must study day and night. I mean, every free moment you have, you must invest in the study of Torah. And of course, the time that you have to earn a living, you must invest it in that. That means every moment occupied, you're not there yet. A person always feels he's not there, and he lives his life responsibly, always bringing about greater levels of perfection. He feels he's not perfected or sufficiently there until he's there. So if that's the case, as the child in utero, being in an incomplete state, the evil inclination doesn't have any right or permission to affect that child pre-birth. Identically, a human being who lives his life in a proper context, that he's always achieving greater levels of perfection, if the person lives his life as if he's not perfected, the evil inclination has the right to come upon that person. Also, because he's the equivalent of the child in utero. So it's very interesting now. Comes out, the Gemara tells us a number of locations, that I've created the evil inclination, and specifically, I've created for the evil inclination, what's the antidote? The antidote is the study of Torah. Meaning, when you study Torah, it's the antidote. What about when you're not studying Torah? Then you're subject. But according to Maral of Prague, he's introducing a new concept. If a person is always in a state of development to achieve completion, he's the equivalent of the child before being born, in utero. So if that's the case, what does it mean? The Torah itself is the antidote to the evil inclination. What it means is, let's say a person is not always engaged in that, in the process of completion. Not. It has to be continuous. You don't leave a moment, a stone unturned. Every moment is fully invested. There's a concept which is discussed in Talmud, Torah umnoso. One's Torah is his vocation. For instance, there's a question which is asked by the Moral of Prague. The text, before we do a mitzvah, it's predicated on a bracha. Before we put on the talis, we say lesate petzitzis. Before we put on the tefillin, as we tie the knot on our arm, we say lo niach tefillin. Before we eat matzah, we say al chilas matzah. Every mitzvah is predicated on a bracha. So before we study Torah, there's a bracha which is said. The bracha which is said is lasok b'divrei Torah, to engage in the words of Torah. So everyone asked the question. Seemingly, when the men of the High Assembly chose the text for this blessing, they should have said Lilmo Torah. Lilmo Torah means to study Torah. We are commanded to study Torah. What's lasok? To engage in Torah. So the Moral of Prague explains that if the text would be Lilmo Torah, to study Torah, a person goes and he applies himself to try to study something, and he's working on it for a day, he understands nothing. So do you mean to say that day itself, he didn't study Torah? If the mitzvah is Lilmo Torah, it has to be a takeaway. There's a gain of knowledge. The man gained no knowledge. The answer is, one doesn't understand something on the moment. It's a process. The mitzvah is the process. What is the process? Lasok, to engage in Torah, to try to understand. That is so the mitzvah ultimately is to have knowledge, but the mitzvah is the process. How do you gain that knowledge? How do you accumulate that knowledge? By participating, by applying yourself, engaging in the process. Therefore, the Moral of Prague says the text of the blessing is not Lilmo Torah, to study Torah, but rather lasok. However, others say, and this I heard many years ago from Rav Gifter, Zecher Tzaddik Livrocha, who was the Rosh Yeshiva in Cleveland, tells, he'd said, he had gone to Mexico City to raise money, and he had an appointment. It took him a few months to get this appointment with an Ashkenazic, observant Jew who ran a factory. So the owner of the factory said to him, you have to come to my office at 5:45 in the morning because the production starts at 6. That's it. I can only see you from 5:45 to 6. You come then, I have time. Otherwise, I have no time. So what happened? He took a taxi. He comes to the factory. Taxi was caught in traffic. He shows up 2 minutes to 6. Production starts at 6. So Rabbi Gifter says to him, he apologizes. Excuse me, taxi was delayed. It was caught in traffic. He says to the rabbi, he says, I'm sorry. He says, I'm running a factory. I can't waste a moment. The production starts. I have to oversee the production. You have a 2-minute appointment. And if it's not enough time, we have to reschedule. Because when I do business, it's business and nothing but business. See, what was Rabbi Gifter's takeaway? Lasok b'divrei Torah. When you study Torah, it has to be fully committed. Nothing interrupts. Unless halachically you're permitted, nothing interrupts the Torah. So that's lasok. That the Torah itself should be no less than engaging responsibly in business, as there are no compromises. You're fully engaged or fully committed. Identically, when you study Torah, it has to be the same level of commitment. That's what he said many years ago. But the Talmud speaks about a situation that certain people who were exempt from saying the Amidah, they only said the Shema. The Amidah, the Shemon Esrei, they didn't say, who are these people? So the Talmud says it's Reb Shimon bar Yochai and his colleagues, and it's his people of his like. Reb Shimon bar Yochai, who's Reb Shimon bar Yochai? Reb Shimon bar Yochai is the author of the Zohar. Who is Reb Shimon bar Yochai? We had mentioned he's of the opinion that if a person is fully committed to Torah study, he does not have to engage in any initiative to earn a living. God will provide it. God will provide whatever he needs. Because Reb Shimon bar Yochai says if a person goes and plows in the plowing season, plants in the planting season, and harvests in the harvest season, and threshes in the threshing season, he says, Torah Matei Aleh, when does one can have time to study Torah? So what's the answer? The answer is Hashem will provide others to do his bidding. That's how it will come. It's not a miracle. Others will do his bidding, and he doesn't have to at all interrupt his Torah study for that. So what does that mean? Reb Shimi Choi, the Gemara says, Talmud says, is Torasa umnoso. The Torah is his craft. Just as one has a craft, one doesn't take off from the craft, from his vocation, do other things. Reb Shimi Choi doesn't waste a moment. Not a moment of his Torah is ever wasted. As a result of that, he doesn't have to ask for healing, doesn't ask for blessing. Everything's comes automatically. And it says, and he cites a verse to support this position. And the Talmud says, many attempted to follow Reb Shimon Choi's prescription in life, and they all failed. Many tried and they failed. Many tried and failed. So Chaim Voloshin says, it says many tried and failed, but a minority succeeded. To go and utilize, invest every moment, fully invested, it's nearly an impossibility. You count those people on one hand. Reb Shimon Choi and his colleagues, they were those people. Kriya Shema is the declaration of your belief, even Reb Shimon Choi has to say. But to supplicate Hashem, to ask him for your needs, Reb Shimon Choi didn't have to ask for his needs. Because as long as he met the criteria of fully being committed Torah-wise, everything else follows. There's a Maral of Prague says something interesting. We find that who is the counterbalance to Mordechai? At Mordechai and the time of the decree to annihilate every man, woman, and child, Haman personified Amalek. The Amalekites, their objective is they cannot tolerate the existence of even one Jew in existence. So he, through his endearing himself to the Persian king, and he paid a king's ransom for this, he was able to issue a decree to annihilate every man, woman, and child. That was Amalek. Who is his counterpart? Who is his counterbalance? Mordechai. Mordechai, through galvanizing the Jews, getting to do tshuva, to repent. Ultimately, the decree was annulled. And what happened? Haman was destroyed. We had read just recently that the richest Jew who ever lived in the history of the world was Korach, because he had taken a third of the wealth that Yosef had hidden during the famine, and he located that wealth when he left Egypt. Who was the other wealthiest commoner who ever lived? Haman HaRasha. Haman was the wealthiest commoner who ever lived. What happened after he was hanged? He was hanged, so of course the wealth went back to the king, to Achashverosh, the Persian king. What happened to his mansion and his home and the possessions in that home? It was transferred to Mordechai. It was given to Esther, who was the queen. She gave it to Mordechai. Did Mordechai ever take any initiative? He never took initiative. How did he gain such? He had tremendous wealth. He was appointed the viceroy of the Persian empire. In addition, he had this great wealth. He didn't take an initiative to it. So he explains, the Maral of Prague, that again, it works the same way. That if a person is fully engaged in the holy side, and you counter the negative side, automatically, and you become victorious, and you negate and nullify the negative, the positive that on the negative side is transferred to the positive. Therefore, everything shifted over, not everything, because Mordechai wasn't the wealthiest Jew who ever lived after Korach, but rather a substantial amount of that wealth was transferred to Mordechai, although he never took any initiative to gain that wealth, because his full investment was only in spirituality, bringing the Jews to repent. That's how the decree was overturned. So it's the same idea. If you do your thing and you're fully occupied in the spiritual, automatically the material is provided without any degree of interruption. Now, sin. Now, in Hebrew, I mentioned the other day, chet is sin. The word chet means sin. Why is but chet in its meaning means diminishment. When we sin, we're diminished. That means there's a vacuum due to sin. But what happens if you fill in all the gaps? There's no room for that sin to in any way seep in. What happens? You're not vulnerable. We find, when did the bondage of Egypt start? When Yaakov Avinu passed away. We find that the portion of Vayechi, the Torah refers to as a Parsha Stuma. It's a sealed portion. Why is it called? The paragraph structure in the Torah is a sealed portion, because when Yaakov Avinu passed away, the eyes and the hearts of the Jews became shut down, sealed. Meaning, as long as Yaakov was alive, he was able to deflect and rebuff any negative influence. It could not penetrate. He created this insular environment. The Jews were not subject to the influence of Egypt, regardless of what Egypt was. Why? Well, who was Yaakov? Yaakov himself was Yaakov Ishtan Yoshev Holim. There wasn't a moment that he wasn't fully invested in Torah. He personified Torah. As a result of that, he created this spiritual fortress that no one was able to penetrate. As negative, as evil as Egypt was in terms of what they represented, they cannot penetrate that barrier which he created. So Yofet Talmud Torah Derech Eretz. It's appropriate. It's to have Talmud Torah with Derech Eretz. Shegiya Shnei Mashkach Chasodom. No, there's an expression in Yiddish. Many years they say that he's too tired to sin. A person puts in a full day, and he has a bunch of friends he went to school with, he grew up with, and they call him up at night, and they said, Jack, we're visiting from out there. Would you like to go out? He says, I had a long day. I could barely keep my eyes open. You're too tired to sin. A person, if you're fully invested, this is without the morale of Prague. If a person is fully invested in Torah and in work, in responsible livelihood, by the end of the day, you have no interest in sinning. Because since you're so sapped, you're fully invested in both holiness and in livelihood, which is to provide, to be the medium for that. Therefore, you have no interest in that. It's not yours. It's not your forte. There's a story with the Chofetz Chaim. They were, in Hungary and Germany, there were wealthy Jews. The Jews were wealthy. There's a wealthy class. In Russia and Poland, the Jews were literally most of them were impoverished. That's why, there's an Ashkenazi custom that Ashkenazim on Pesach don't eat legumes, don't eat rice, don't eat legumes. Anything that you're able to make bread out of, rice bread, anything has any semblance to bread, which is chametz, Ashkenazi Jews assume a minhag, we have a custom, we don't eat those food items. Therefore, Jews don't eat corn and rice and beans, because those are all vegetables which you could actually turn into bread. So the question is, what about potatoes? They should have, but Ashkenazi Jews eat potatoes on Pesach. So the answer which is given is, the potatoes in Russia, that was the staple. If they would have said, we don't eat potatoes, Jews would have had nothing to eat. That was how impoverished they were. They had nothing to eat. So what happened? A woman who lights Shabbos candles, she usually has a charity box, what we call a pushka. A tzedakah box right next to the candles. And right before she lights candles, she says, supplicates Hashem. She prays on behalf of her children and her husband and her family. Then she puts charity in the box, and then she lights the candles. That's the custom. So in Europe, every woman had a pushka. It was and they would put a penny in, or a kopek, whatever the coin was, the smallest coin. They didn't have much to put in there to support the Torah institutions in Europe. We're talking about not much, but whatever the value was. And that's how they raised some part of the budget. And there was a fund that any community had a yeshiva, had a Talmud Torah, had something, they would be eligible to receive money from this money, which was accumulated from all these women that before they would light candles, they put money in the tzedakah box, the charity box, okay? So what happens? There were 2 or 3 very wealthy Lithuanian Jews. One was a lumber baron, one was a sugar baron, one was a tea baron. Wasatsky tea, today there's a tea called Wasatsky. Wasatsky was the tea baron. There was another person, his name was Brody. Brody was the lumber baron. And there was another Jew, that was the sugar baron. And they said, something, people have so little. They have so little. That kopek they should use really to support their families. We're willing to underwrite whatever money they gather from whatever's given. we'll give that equivalent amount of money and let all the people have their kopecks to live, to raise the level of lifestyle, to provide a little bit more for their families. That was the story. So what happened? They went to the Chofetz Chaim. It sounded like a phenomenal idea. Chofetz Chaim said no. Why? He says, firstly, for every Jewish family to contribute for the support of Torah, that means every Jew in Europe has a share of the Torah that's studied. You three people, although your intention is phenomenal, you'll be rewarded for that intention. But how do we have a right to deny every Jew from participating in the support of Torah? That's firstly. That's the reason why he will not allow it. Every Jew has a right and should have the right, the privilege and the merit to have a share in Torah. Secondly, he says, what happens if these wealthy people, over time, they have reversals, financial reversals, and they're not able to continue? Once people are no longer conditioned to give charity, they stop giving charity. All of a sudden, there's a crisis. To get people back on track, they don't get back on track so easily. And therefore, this is one of the machinations of the evil inclination. He'll present something which is phenomenal. He'll alleviate poverty to a degree. He'll put a dent in it. Now the Jews can put the kopecks in their pocket. But ultimately, you know what happens? He lets you ride the wave for a while. But ultimately, eventually, he closes the door. When he closes the door, you never go back to where you were before because people stop giving charity because they're no longer conditioning charity. So when did this story come about? When Menachem Begin was the prime minister of Israel, Menachem Begin was very, very traditional, and he was very pro the study of Torah. He felt that is the lifeblood of the Jewish people. Without Torah, we have no Jewish identity. So his government said to Rav Shach, Zecher Tzaddik Livrocha, he says, you know something? The government is willing to underwrite all the yeshivas in Israel, all the high schools, all the elementary schools, we'll underwrite. It's like, public education. We'll underwrite that also. And everything was phenomenal. The amount of money they have to raise from in Israel, outside of Israel, to support the institutions, it's a fortune. The Israeli government is willing to, it's part of the budget, the national budget. So Rav Shach sided the story with the Chofetz Chaim. He says, for two reasons. He rejected it. He says, thank you very much. But firstly, every Jew should have the merit that he participates in the support of Torah. Secondly, what would be if the government changes and they're not as pro-Torah as you are? Then we have a problem. But once Jews are not in the habit of giving charity, for this, they don't give charity any longer. And as a result of that, he rejected it. It's the same thing. A person who's conditioned to assume responsibility for his own financial needs, that person will always do what he has to do responsibly. Once a person himself, you rely on others, and then somehow the carpet is pulled from under you, the floor falls out from under you, what do? You're frantic. And then what happens? You do things which may not be correct, not be appropriate. So therefore, called Torah she'eni mo malocha, Torah which is not complemented work, sofa patela. Ultimately, it's come to an end. Because a person studies Torah and simultaneously he's doing things which are not appropriate, which are illegal. Goreres Avon. Ultimately, it will bring sin. That will bring sin. Now, the Talmud tells us that the signet of God is truth. The mitzvahs, the Torah is divided into three sections. There are rational laws, there are laws which are testaments, and the laws which are statutes. What are laws which are rational? Don't steal, one's not permitted to steal, one's not permitted to damage, ownership rights. These are rational laws. Testament are the holidays. We commemorate freedom. We commemorate when we became a nation. We commemorate certain things. In the desert, we were protected with clouds of glory. And then we have statutes, dietary laws, not to wear a combination with linen. The ultimate is the red heifer, the paradum, these and that. But it's a rational law. So rationally speaking, how do you take something that's not yours? It's the antithesis of truth. And God cannot tolerate it. God will not tolerate it. So if the only reason you study Torah, which is absolute truth, it's truth in its absolute context. Emes Kenei Bal Timkor, Solomon says in Mishlei, Proverbs, acquire truth and don't sell it. Torah is absolute truth because it's God's wisdom. So how do you study God's truth? Well, simultaneously, your behavior is something which is untruthful, which borders on something which is the antithesis of that. Therefore, ultimately, we say, Sofa Betelo, ultimately that Torah doesn't come to an end. It's going to be nullified. And therefore, and when that happens, it will bring with it, it'll bring plenty of sin. The Gemara tells us at the end of Sanhedrin, who was the person who opposed King David? Who was the one who tried to destroy him? David was the son-in-law of the king. He killed Goliath, the giant, and because he killed him, King Saul had given his daughter as a wife to David. David himself, not only did he become king, was he a warrior, he was an exceptional level of being a Torah sage. And he was a leading Torah sage of the generation. And the head of the Sanhedrin, his name was Doeg Hadomi. He was a young man. He could not tolerate David. And he did whatever he could to destroy him. And he put a wedge between his father-in-law and himself. And he stoked those coals to the point where King Saul was convinced that David wants to take the kingdom from him, and he's trying to undermine his power. He became a fugitive because of this. Doeg Hadomi was taken before the age of 35. He was the leading Torah sage of the generation. First, he forgot all his Torah, and ultimately he died. Why did he forget his Torah? Because a man who represents such evil, he cannot be the repository for Torah. Cannot be. If Torah is truth, and he is everything but truth, as a result of that, he forgot his Torah. So we're saying over here, it's the Torah Sofa Betelo. The Torah ultimately will be nullified. When one studies, why do we study? It's Lilmod Amnas Lasos. We study, it's not abstract knowledge. It's not abstract intellectualism. It's only to be able to actualize the mitzvos, the commandments, as they should be actualized, as they should be performed. The Torah study has value unto itself, but the objective is ultimately to observe the mitzvahs, the Torah itself. But if a person himself is doing things which are inappropriate, and automatically that clear, it's not the objective, because he's willing to resort to other things, automatically the Torah is not functioning properly, and therefore it's what? Sof Betela, it's going to come to an end. And when it comes to an end, you no longer have the antidote, and therefore it brings more sin itself. Okay? You know, one of the tenets of Judaism, the 13 tenets which was codified by Rambam, is reward and punishment. The Rambam first says that God knows everything that exists. He knows your thoughts, he knows your actions. Why does God have to know your thought and actions? Why is that a prerequisite to reward and punishment? Now we know that when one performs, we can perform on many levels. A person can perform on a level which is selfless, purely for the sake of God. A person could perform out of love. A person could perform out of reverence. And each of these levels assumes another level of quality, of spirituality, due to the exceptional level of performance, whether it's love, whether it's reverence. But a person could perform what we call shlo lishmo, with an ulterior motive. I want acknowledgement. I'm doing it for compensation, financial compensation. That's why I'm doing it. So although it has value, but because it was not purely for the sake of God, it's considered deficient. It's very interesting. We just read now in this past week that Balak, who was the king of Moab, he commissioned Bilam, the prophet of the nations, to curse the Jewish people. And Bilam believed somehow he could hoodwink God and how somehow deceive him and slip in the curse. How? He tells Balak to build 7 altars and bring 14 sacrifices, a bull and a sheep on each one of these altars. And he tells him to do this multiple times. Now, who was David's grandmother? King David's grandmother was Ruth the Moabite. She converted. Boaz married Ruth the Moabite, Ruth HaMoaviyah, and she was the grandmother of David HaMelech. Who was she a granddaughter of? She was a granddaughter of Balak. She was Balak's granddaughter. Balak, the Moabite king who commissioned Bilam to curse the Jews, she was a granddaughter of Balak. Now, why did Balak merit to have such a special granddaughter? I mean, he wanted to destroy the Jewish people. And he commissioned a man who personified evil to curse us. So the Talmud says, because he brought sacrifices. He was a pagan, but he brought sacrifices to God because he believed only by bringing them to God, ingratiating himself with God, he'll be able to destroy the Jewish people. But that's not why you bring a sacrifice. You bring a sacrifice to show your submission to God, your reverence to God. That wasn't his intention. It was to destroy the Jews. But nevertheless, he did bring a sacrifice to God. It was shlo l'shmo. It was not with the right intent. So from there, we learned the concept that although when one does a mitzvah not for the right reason, it still has mitzvah value and deserving of exceptional reward. And in merit of that, he merited to have Ruth HaMoaviyah, Ruth the Moabite, who was the grandmother of David HaMelech for that reason. So therefore, when you toil in Torah, what should your intention be? Of course, there's no question. We had this in last week's Pirkei Avos. You should serve the master not for the sake of reward. Not for the sake of reward, it'd be for the sake of the mitzvah, no question. But what about if you engage with a communal project? You say on a personal level, you say, some things I'll have less reward. But if a person wants to succeed, you have to put on tefillin. You don't put on tefillin for the right reason. I have no choice. I don't want to be punished. I want to be there because I'm not there. What are people going to say about me? So that's why he puts on the tefillin. That's not for the right reason. You put on tefillin because you're supposed to put on tefillin. Not because if you're absent, people will say, and they question whether you're an observant Jew. That's not the reason why you put on tefillin. And you put it on for that reason. You did the right thing. You did the right thing for the wrong reason, but you did the right thing. What about if you engage in a communal project? You want to do something on behalf of the community. Even if one does something lishma, what's the basis why you will succeed or not succeed? You need tremendous merit to succeed. Without merit, one cannot succeed. In an area which needs special merit. I'll give you an example. We say, God brings merit to the meritorious. I'll give you an example. A person has capital and a person has good deals. Who do you bring the good deal to? The man who doesn't have working capital. What's the point to bring the deal to him? He doesn't have any working capital. So you bring it to the one that when you bring him the deal, he can do the deal. So who does God bring special merit to? To the meritorious. Because they have merit. Therefore, they're already established that they do this deal. This is that kind of deal. A person who this is not his kind of deal, God's not bringing him that type of deal. Because that's not his deal. But a person who is meritorious, that he already met challenges, and despite the challenges, he succeeded, God's going to bring him other challenges to succeed because he has the ability to succeed because he's proven himself that he has succeeded in the past. Okay? So now, a person, but as much as you succeed, it's all based upon your own merit. If you need tremendous merit, it's not so simple to succeed. What about if you engage for a communal project? You're doing something on behalf of your community. So the Mishnah tells us something very interesting. If you engage for the sake of God, Hashem will allow you to draw on the merit of the whole community. Because since it's for communal, that they should be beneficiaries of your engagement, the success of your endeavor is not only dependent on your own merit. God will, since it's on behalf of them, God allows you to draw of all their merit in combination to succeed in that particular endeavor, in that initiative. Okay? Now, when we divide the pie, how do we divide the pie? If I only was able, you go into investment and you have many investors. You may do the deals, you may get a bigger piece of the profit, but you understand all the investors, they have to get that piece also because they're all investors. So what about when you go and do a project on behalf of the community? It says, if you do it with the right mindset, for the sake of God, God will allow you to utilize their merit to succeed after you've succeeded. You couldn't have succeeded by yourself. Not possible, because you needed their merit to bring about this level of success. What piece of the pie do you get? Do you get the whole pie, or you only get your piece of the pie? The Mishnah tells us you get the whole pie. That because of your initiative, and you did it for the sake of God, God says, I will allow you, although you drew from their merit to be able to bring about the success, you will be the beneficiary of everything, although you only contributed only a fraction of what was needed to bring about this level of success. But where do we see this concept? There's a midrash. The midrash says, there's a mitzvah, a person has a male child. The Torah says you have a positive commandment to circumcise him on the 8th day. And it's an exceptional mitzvah that a person should bring his son, lebriso shel Avram Avinu, to the covenant of Avram Avinu. Now he's circumcised. And God gives him full credit, the father, for circumcising his child. So the midrash says, God says, if I wouldn't have given him a son, if his wife would have conceived, he wouldn't have a child. Now that she conceived, she had a male. Why did she have that? Because God willed that there should be a child born to this person. And now that he has a son, God says, all you have to do is circumcise him. And you get full credit, although who provided the son and who provided you with the ability to father a child. God is there at every step of the way. And when you circumcise it, he gives you full credit for circumcising that child, although all the background which brought that about, God provided all that. And that's everything in life. So the Chafetz Chaim writes, a human being is endowed with an intellect. We're endowed with a nervous system. We're endowed with ability. Our physical body, our minds, is all endowment of God. What's our contribution to any action we do? It's called free choice. That's it. You put tefillin on your arm and you wrap those straps. You get credit for putting on tefillin. Who gave you the ability? Who gave you the arm? And who gave you the ability to wrap the strap and to tighten that knot? God gave it. And God says, but it's all yours. I give you full credit and you're fully rewarded for that. Although God provided 19.999% of the capital. What was your contribution? Because I met the challenge and I chose to put on the tefillin. But even the ability to put on tefillin, what's its value? You only contribute a pittance to the end result. God says it doesn't make a difference. It's all yours. And we see this continuously. The Gemara Talmud tells us in 2 locations, the Gemara tells us in the last tractate of Shas of the Talmud that before a child is conceived, an angel takes the droplet of semen before God and he pronounces on that droplet, wise, foolish, healthy, infirm, strong, weak, wealthy, poor. Every pronouncement is on that child, except one pronouncement. Tzaddik Rasha, righteous, Dval righteous evil, that pronouncement not made. Why? Because everything is predestined except free choice. Tzaddik Rosh, which is dependent free choice, that's up to the individual. But it does make a difference. A person is on a boat and it has a rudder and there's a very strong current in that river. And all you have to do is turn that rudder to go in a certain direction. But if not for the water, if not for the current, if not for the boat, if not for the rudder, you wouldn't be going that direction. But when you arrive at your destination, why did you arrive there? Because you turned the rudder, and that's why you arrived at your destination. That's what it's all about. What turns the rudder? What brings about the end result? It's your choice. You have a challenge. Now, what are you going to do with that challenge? Are you going to meet the challenge, or are you going to succumb to the temptation and remain passive or do something else? Same thing. If you're ready, engaging, and you something on behalf of the community, and you engage for the sake of God, God says that not only will you succeed when you do it, if you do it with the right mindset, you'll be able to draw of all their merit. And so you'd say, maybe if you're drawing for their merit, without that, it couldn't be accomplished. So maybe you should divide the reward. Because you have to come on to, they were contributors. No, that because you're the one who galvanized it, and you were the one who rose to that level, to do it on that qualitative level, you're the beneficiary of everything. It's very interesting. There are opportunities which are unheard of opportunities. If a person goes and he supports a certain initiative, which ultimately affect endless Jews, and that's your intent. You want to affect Jews positively, whatever it is. And you have that ability because you're gifted with a certain ability. But it would say, no, it's not simple. You're only one person. And you do it for the right reason, and you succeed. That means every Jew who now does the right thing because of your initiative, you're accredited for every one of those things. Could you imagine? It's unimaginable. The Chofetz Chaim writes that if a person pays the tuition for a child, and that child now is an observant Jew, and because of that level of observance, he raises an observant family. Until the end of time, every mitzvah that's done as a result of that original person who was given that education, everything accrues to the person who paid that first tuition. You know what kind of return this is? It's not to be believed. Because if not for your contribution and providing that first education for that first member of that family, now you have hundreds of years pass, and all those years, and the person is no longer alive. The first person who had provided that, it just keeps accruing. Any mitzvah that's done by that family or influence that family as anyone else, and it's only because that original member of the family had brought up his family with a certain perspective, certain environment, everything accrues to that first person. Something phenomenal. It's unheard of. Usually you do something, they forget about you. Once the person, they close that grave, it's like you never existed. But not on God's tally. God, it just keeps accumulating. God keeps track. If that person did the mitzvah because that original person may go back 20 generations ago, it doesn't make a difference. It keeps accruing and accruing and accruing to that person. Because if not for his initial initiative, it wouldn't have happened. So if a person goes and he wants to affect the tzibur, the Jewish community properly, and he does it for the right reason, not for his own ulterior motive, for them that they should be in good standing with God, God says, I will allow you to use their merit and you will succeed. And not only will you succeed, the end result, you are the beneficiary of that level of accomplishment. We all need incentives. Nobody's born a tzaddik. So how do you start? You have to incentivize a person. Everybody needs to shlo the shema. You need the acknowledgement, you need the praise, you need the financial compensation, but ultimately, hopefully, when you mature and you see its innate value, you do it for the right reason. But even then, it's not simple. Everybody has a challenge. We find that Adam, after he ate of the tree of knowledge, what did God say to him? Where are you? Now, how did he process that? Did he say, if God is asking, where am I? Does that mean God has certain blind spots that he doesn't know? He didn't process it that way. When God asked where I am, because otherwise, why is God asking, where am I? He understood because God didn't want to overwhelm him. So he wanted to give him some time to gain his composure. When God said to Bilam, who are these people with you? We just read it yesterday. Who are they? He said, why does God ask me this question? If God is all-knowing, he should know who they are. Evidently, that means God has certain blind spots. He doesn't know everything. So everybody has their own takeaway. See, even after you've done it endless years with an ulterior motive, hopefully, you always have a moment of choice. So now do it for the right reason. But the man remains on the same track. Never changes. But that's part of choice. When you start as a child or beginning of your journey, everybody is shlo lishma. We need incentives. We need ulterior motives. We need that to get us going. But there's a time in life you mature sufficiently where you've seen enough and experienced enough. No, as they said, now grow up and do it for the right reason. That is the challenge. That's mitoch shlo bolishma. Many people never get there, but it still has value because it's within the equation that to create that moment of choice, that moment of choice will be provided for you. And therefore, Chaim Volozhin says, the Gemara tells, the Talmud tells in Sanhedrin, that a tzaddik is greater than the greatest angel. The greatest angel. How's it possible? Could the tzaddik understand what the angel is? Understands. Is he as holy as the angel? The answer is definitely not. But the angel is who he is because God created him to be who he was, who he is. The understanding, the holiness, his dimension. A tzaddik is a tzaddik because he's a self-made person. Because every inch of the way, it was due to his choice, making the right choice. So he built its self-capital. He's self-capitalized. The angel is not self-capitalized. Every aspect of the angel is God capitalizing him. Therefore, tzaddikim are even greater than the greatest angel. Okay, we're going to have to stop here because at 11 to 12, I'm saying a webinar for Fifth Avenue Synagogue under 3 weeks. So, and we can do Daf Yomi now, so I have to stop right now. Okay, everybody be well.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, we can do the Daf Yomi right now. Ruthie? 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 Bob,
Hi, Rabbi. I'm
yeah,
here.
I'm shifting to the other side because I need the plug of, I
Should
don't
I-
want, I'm
Should
gonna
I
run out of.
re-sign in or just
No,
stay?
no, no.
Ah, you're moving. Okay, I got
I'm
you.
moving to plug in the,
Very good.
second.
You're still recording from the last session, Rabbi.
I am.
Yeah, it says in the upper left-hand corner.